Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Borderlands for PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. Now I held off on this game for quite a while because it has issues on the PC. And a lot of these issues pertain to the online component still. But when I originally heard about this game on PC, apparently it was practically unplayable. From performance problems up to being completely unable to connect to things online, for crashes and all this kind of stuff. And so I came to it pretty late, and eventually I guess they got everything fairly resolved, because it is very playable now. But still, it does crash rather often, actually. It still has online connection issues, and it's still doing the matchmaking and peer-to-peer and that kind of thing. And I hate peer-to-peer, and I hate matchmaking, because I'm a PC gamer, not a console gamer, people. Anyway, it is done by Gearbox, and I have a rather large amount of respect for them, because they did my favorite Half-Life game, and that was Opposing Force. And it was a really good game. So, and they've done some pretty good games after that, so I figured I'd give them the benefit of the doubt and try it out, and so here's the result. Now, the first thing I noticed was that the graphics were on Unreal Engine 3, and they actually look pretty good. And that's mostly from the art style, which is this kind of cel-shaded look. It's kind of cartoony. And that actually really suits it well, to be perfectly honest with you. It's nice to have a game that's kind of cartoony and silly for a change, as opposed to just brown and gray and looking realistic. Now, this is still a lot of browns and grays, but it's the kind of browns and grays that you're fine with, because it's cartoony, it's wacky, it's over the top, that kind of thing. And so, I really got into this art style originally. And eventually, it kind of wore off on me, and I looked at it for what it really is. I'm like, okay, as far as the graphics go, they're nothing bad. They're nothing good either. They're just kind of there. They do their job, and that's about it. The textures are decent. I mean, it's hard to get somewhere with textures and stuff for a cel-shaded game like this. But at the same time, nothing looks bad. So, the characters look fine. In fact, they look pretty good, actually. The environments look okay. I will say that they could have been improved a little bit, just to help suck you into the world a little bit more. Animations, though, they're all over the place. Your first-person animations are pretty wimpy, actually. There's nothing that's terrible, but everything just looks stock. All the pistols have the same animations. All the revolvers do. All the assault rifles and battle rifles, combat rifles, whatever you want to call them. All the sniper rifles, they all have the same animations. And usually it's one of two animations for a sniper rifle anyway. But still, they reuse everything, and sometimes it doesn't fit the weapons that are being used. So sometimes you'll have clipping errors and stuff like that. And so overall, the graphics work fine, but they're really nothing to write home about. Now, the sound design's a little bit different. The sound effects themselves, the gunshots, the environmental sound effects, those all actually sound really good. I will admit that they don't sound up to par compared to other games, but they do sound good for what they do. And the problem I have with them is that there's not enough variety in the sound effects. For some reason, they decided to make the pistols sound like pretty much almost airsoft guns. To be perfectly honest with you, they do not sound like guns. They sound like air guns, and that's really irritating to me. I would have at least liked some beefy pistol effects, you know? But everything else sounds fairly okay. The shotguns have a very generic sound to them, but it works fine. All those sound effects in general work fine. Voice acting's not bad. It could have been improved, obviously, but it's not bad. The guardian angel thing, whatever you call it, that follows you around and tells you where to go and stuff like that, is really irritating. Just because the voice actress seemed to not really care. And she just kind of went, okay, I'm going to do this with whatever way I want to do it, and I'm just going to kind of goof off with it. And so it ends up getting on your nerves. But overall, the voice acting does its job, and that's about it. The music is pretty lacking. It works fine. It's your fairly stereotypical wasteland kind of stuff, some guitar work going on, that kind of thing. But it's really nothing special either. It doesn't really get you involved or anything. It doesn't really get your toes tapping or anything like that. It's just your standard music that's there to fill the void. And that's pretty much what it does. So the sound design overall works, but it's really nothing special either. Now, I'll get to the gameplay in a minute, which is probably the most fascinating part of Borderlands, but anyway. Storyline is this. You go to Pandora because you're seeking fortune and fame and all this kind of stuff, and there's this rumor of a vault. It's a kind of a legend thing. And in this vault is this untold riches, and it could be alien technology or whatever it is. And so there's this legend of the Vault Angel or whatever she's called that will lead you to the vault and all this kind of stuff. And so that ends up happening, and that's your basic storyline. It's a really stupid storyline. There's no depth to it whatsoever. It's like, hey, you're going in for riches. That's it. Okay, whatever. Anyway, the gameplay is by far the most interesting part of the game, and as well the part that makes it fail miserably. Basically, you end up having this shooter mechanic that actually works fairly well, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a fairly standard shooter mechanic. So it actually feels like a shooter from the early 2000s. And actually earlier than that, probably. It feels more like the Quake 2 era in terms of shooter mechanics. It is extremely simple in the shooter mechanics. It's so rudimentary because you have a melee button, you have an aim button, and you have a shoot button. That's all you need to know. And so it ends up being this extremely arcadey shooter kind of thing, and it ends up being annoying. Because what ends up happening is you'll choose a different class. Say you choose a hunter like I did on my first playthrough, which was probably a really bad idea, but anyway. If you're a hunter, you use sniper rifles mostly, and revolvers when you can finally get them in the game, which isn't until, I don't know, about a fourth of the way through, maybe, actually, probably closer to a third of the way through the game. Anyway, you start with the sniper rifles, and you just end up getting headshot after headshot after headshot, because you don't have to worry about scope sway, you don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. It's just such a rudimentary shooter mechanic. You'll probably never miss unless you're a really bad shot. So the combat just quickly becomes very monotonous. And even if you're playing as another character type, it's still very easy to fight things. As long as you keep your distance and just like lob grenades and stuff. Now there are a few boss fights that are tough, but again, those are boss fights, so you kind of expect them to be tough. But for the most part, the game's pretty easy. Now, what they did differently with this game was the shooter mechanic was secondary to the rest of the stuff. Because this is a very stat-heavy game, at least for the weapons. Because you can level up and get your character to different skills. Like, for instance, the hunter has different skills where you can like call in a falcon or get bonuses to headshots and stuff like that. Whereas the tank centers around melee combat and close range, that kind of thing. And the sirens for stealth and stuff like that. But so you can actually play the game very differently depending on which character you choose to play as. But at the end of the day, the problem is this is Diablo with guns. That is what you can sum this game up as. It's Diablo with guns. You stop caring about the story, I don't know, about a fourth of the way through the game, simply because it doesn't exist. The storyline starts off the game, and that's about it until about, I don't know, 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the rest of the game. And so you end up being like, what's going on here? Why is the story suddenly picking up? I was doing all these side quests. And, excuse me, there are a lot of side quests, but at the same time, there's not enough. Because you end up just running around trying to shoot stuff so you can level up to get to the next tier of quests. And believe me, it actually takes a really long time to level up eventually. And eventually you've gotten your character to such a point where he can kill pretty much anything in one hit. And so you become indestructible. And that makes the game way too easy. And so you end up having this Diablo problem. Now, Diablo is actually a little bit harder, but that's mostly because it's a piece of crap. But anyway, Diablo is the worst role-playing game I've ever played. This is not the game you want to base your role-playing system off of. It's not even a role-playing game. It's just a game with stats. Anyway, the Diablo principle applies here. All you do, the entire game, there's no point to this game. Don't just completely disregard the story. All you do for this entire game is shoot stuff in order to get more stuff, in order to sell some of this stuff, and get better gear, and to repeat the process. That is all you do the entire game. You just run around, you shoot stuff, and then you get better gear, you sell some of your gear, you get more money to buy better stuff, and you just keep repeating this process over and over and over and over again until you've reached the end of the game. That's all you do the entire game. The side quests have absolutely no bearing on anything whatsoever, except getting more experience points and more money, and more items, so you can get better stuff. And, I hate that system, because it ends up making you just bored with the game very quickly. Now, this is what happened with Diablo. When I played Diablo, I was bored with it after 25 minutes. After playing Borderlands, I was bored with it after 30 minutes, and so you end up having this major problem of monotony through, oh, I don't know, 95 to 98% of the game, basically. Because it's a surprisingly long game. And then you have the online component. Now, you can either play co-op with your buddies or co-op with random people through the matchmaking system. And I hate matchmaking systems. I hate peer-to-peer. So I don't play this game online. And I did manage to play it with a buddy once. It was boring. Because all we did, and all we ended up doing was just running at each other and meleeing each other to death. That's all we ended up doing the entire co-op session. We didn't bother doing any side quests or anything because it was so laggy. And so what ends up happening is the online play is practically impossible just because of the lag. And so it ends up being this horribly boring experience, horribly irritating experience. Excuse me. And when I was playing it in single player, I just got really bored with it really quickly. And so I really can't recommend this to anybody. Not a single person. I appreciate it for actually doing the RPG mechanics in terms of the character development. It actually did that fairly decently up until the end, wherein your character is ridiculously high level and just blowing things away with one shot from a small handgun just because you're so badass now. But that's the vibe I get from this game. It's for people who like Diablo and nobody else. I know a lot of people love Diablo. I hate it with a passion. And so I don't know what I was thinking when I got this game. I thought maybe it would be okay, but it's really not. It's not a good game at all. It's horribly, horribly boring. But at the same time, at least it's not Diablo. Now, don't get me wrong. I like Gearbox games in general. But at the same time, when they release something this mediocre, I can't help but be, put off by it. So I'm pretty worried for Duke Nukem Forever after playing this game, actually. I'm actually very worried for it. But anyway, I can't recommend this game to anybody. It's horribly boring, at least to me. Now, I know people who like Diablo will absolutely love Borderlands because it's exactly the same as Diablo, but with guns. And you get some pretty ridiculous guns, I'll admit. There's a lot of guns. There's billions of them. But at the same time, they're just different guns with different stats. That's all they are. It feels like Mass Effect, where all the guns pretty much shoot the same. They just have different stats. But at least in Mass Effect, they don't do ridiculous stuff like suddenly your shotgun shoots waves, or suddenly you have a rifle that shoots missiles that explode in nuclear fire and stuff like that. Now, you do have some pretty fun moments with that in Borderlands, but really that wears off very quickly. So you end up being left with this very hollow shell of a game. And so I can't recommend it to anybody. I give it a 1.5 out of 5, and thanks for watching.